Welcome to Kabil Kids. Today we will learn about tactical themes like pin and skewers. So let me show you what is a pin. Suppose we have a bishop here, and as you can see the bishop is attacking the king, but there is a pawn in between. That is why this pawn cannot move forward or even capture diagonally. And that is why we can take advantage of that by playing moves like rook h5 check. The pawn cannot take the rook because the bishop is pinning that pawn, and the queen is also attacked at the same time. If the queen takes the rook, we take the queen back, and again the pawn cannot take the queen, so it's a winning position for white. This was an absolute pin, which means that no matter what, the pawn cannot take the queen. But we will see an example of a relative pin in this case, in which we will play queen f8. And as you can see, the rook is attacked twice and the queen is undefended. So if the rook moves, we get the queen. And if he doesn't do anything, then the rook is attacked twice, so we can take the rook. And that is why this is a relative pin, because rook can move actually and we can take the queen. That is why this is a relative pin and not an absolute one like the last time. In the absolute pin, a king is involved. Let's see another example of a pin. In this case, as you can see that the knight is pinned to the queen. So we can take advantage of that. But first we have to also notice that the king is also a little weak. Both these diagonals are very weak and this diagonal is already controlled by the queen. That is why, taking advantage of the fact that the knight is pinned, we can give the check bishop d4. And the king has nowhere to go. He can try moves like bringing the rook in between, but that wouldn't help. So he has to take with the knight, and now once he has taken with the knight, we can take the queen and win the game. Let's see another example of a pin. In this case, the rook is pinned to the king, and this is an example of another absolute pin. Here we can put our queen on d8, and now black cannot do anything. Black cannot take our queen because it is pinned by our rook to the king, and if black takes our rook, then we just take his queen and win the game. Let's see some examples of skewer. In this case, as you can see, this rook is on this diagonal, and if we take this bishop away, then it's force for the black king to capture, and then the black king and the rook will be on the same diagonal. And luckily we have a bishop on g3 which can attack the king and at the same time skewer the rook on d8. So let's try that. Rook cross f6, king has to take, otherwise it will be a piece down. King takes and bishop h4 check. So no matter where the king moves, we get the rook and we are a piece up. Let's see another example of a skewer. So as you can see here, this diagonal can be useful for us because when we take the bishop, the queen has to take, and with the support of the pawn, we can play bishop f4. And now the queen and the rook both are attacked. The queen has to move because it is a stronger piece. No matter where it moves, we will just take the rook and win the game. So this is a very interesting example in which we have to sacrifice our queen. So here we can take the rook on a7 and we are giving a check. So we have taken a rook, so the queen has to take us back, otherwise we will simply be a rook up. And it's a check also, so the thing is, if the king moves, then we will take the queen. So the queen has to take, and now we will play rook a1 check. And the queen is in the line of fire. The king has to move and we will capture the queen. We are a rook up and this will be an easy game. Let's see an example of pin which may be a little difficult. As you can see, our queen is hanging and this rook is also hanging. But if we take the queen of black, then the rook can take our rook and it will be a checkmate on the back rank. So we can't do that. So there must be some way by which we can protect our queen or sacrifice a queen and take advantage. In this case, we will sacrifice a queen and play rook cross d8. The idea is that when queen cross queen, we will play bishop h6, pinning the bishop and threatening a checkmate. Now it's very difficult to save the checkmate and white will win the game. Let's see one last example of skewer. So after solving many examples of skewer, it seems like we can simply take the knight when the pawn takes. We can give a check with the rook and take the queen. But unfortunately that doesn't work, because when we take the knight and we give a check with the rook, the bishop can come in between. So this was a simple one, because we will just give a check with the queen. As you can see, if the king moves, we get the queen. That is why it is forced for black to take the queen. And now we will take the knight with the rook cross h8. And now the king has to move. He has no option. Once the king moves, we take the queen, and we have two rooks, and he has a rook and a bishop, so obviously we are better. I hope you found the content insightful. Visit our website www.kabilkids.com or contact us at info@kabilkids.com. Please like, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you and stay tuned for the next exciting video.